Welcome to the Connected Leaders Academy virtual conference designed to reshape your vision of transformation. As we navigate the evolving business landscape, our speakers will unveil innovative strategies to manage and initiate change. Prepare to adapt, innovate, and lead, ensuring your role as a catalyst in this transformative era.
Good morning. My name is Zoltán Szentkirályi. I'm a statistician by training. I teach statistics at SMU and at various places. And I'm also a musician. I've played music for most of my life. And I'm a life coach for men. And we will get into how that came about in this talk. So today I want to talk to you about adversity. And in particular, the most amazing things that can come from adversity, and in keeping in mind some of those amazing things, which we're going to get into today, is basically the blueprint for how to stay inspired through adversity. Now, I thought it might be helpful to begin with the word adversity and just look at the definition of what that is, because that gives us a little insight right off the bat. So Webster's dictionary says adversity, essentially adverse fortune or misfortune, an adverse event or circumstance. Well, so then what's adverse, right? So let's look at that. Something adverse is unfavorable or antagonistic, opposed to one's interest. And even comes to mind adversary, coming from adverse, right? Someone that's not with you, an opponent or an enemy, someone who's against you. So all these things are a good backdrop to keep in mind if we're going to talk about adversity. And in particular, the overcoming of adversity has a very strong purpose. So I'm going to begin with when I was a kid, growing up. All right. So there are many stories, but essentially, just like any kid, I had my insecurities. I was not very athletic. Um, the European kid with the funny name. But there were insecurities for the family, and there were also rich blessings as well. But one of the things that we had to, um, as a family, that we didn't have a lot of money. And so that was one thing that was difficult growing up. But again, there was always kind of seeing both sides of the story. My mom made very healthy food for us, brown rice and red kidney beans, the complete protein. So I could always see, even if there was something negative, well, maybe there was something positive on the other side of that. Well, I grew up eating very healthy, for example. Um, and other things that as a family we had to deal with. We were like a Hungarian family, big family, 6 kids, a little island in small college town, Ohio. Of course, we had our friends and neighbors, but in the house, it was our own Hungarian experience. But what I saw early on, regardless of what insecurities I had of being kind of less athletic, and I saw my parents overcoming heartbreaking challenges. And so I began to see that they also could see the positives in the adversity. Um, my dad was a professor at the university. He's a professor of music. I would watch him through his study. We had those French doors where he would close it, and then he would practice or he would compose, and he would play the piano with great passion. And my mom was passionate about teaching us excellent language skills. She loved the Montessori method. And so, regardless of whether we had little money, uh, we also had these rich experiences growing up. And so I always saw that there's this trade-off between the hardship and also the positives. So, in other words, I learned I can focus on the best. And so that's the very beginning part of this talk. The very first thing that I learned that's been key to overcoming adversity is focus on the best. More specifically, when you encounter a great hardship or challenge, believe in the best possible outcome. Now, this is key. And specifically, allowing your mind to believe in something that seems so improbable, so unlikely, and yet be willing to believe in that best possible outcome as far as your imagination can go, right? As a kid, that's sometimes easier to do than as an adult when we've started to have, the cares of life. This is key, though, believing in the best possible outcome. So, a couple stories to share. In middle school, we did those fundraisers. You go out and you sell candles to the neighbors and you get a sheet and you mark it up. And of course, there's some motivation. The school wants everyone to be engaged. And so if you sell certain number of items, then when you get to school, you can get a yo-yo from the big bin. And if you might be the lucky one, if your yo-yo has a striped string, you win a free boombox. So I had in my mind, okay, well, we don't have money for a boombox, but I'm gonna get that free boombox. Completely unlikely. And as it turns out, somehow mysteriously, this was my first experience with, for a seventh grader, a miracle. Somehow there was a second yo-yo after they already gave one away with a striped string that I got. So these are small things as a kid that can really be an encouragement that, wow, I can believe in something miraculous. But then, of course, there were some more weighty things as you get older, not just, having some toys or a boombox, right? And so I knew as I was going through school that even though we didn't have much money, which is essentially required to go to college, if anyone would go to college, it would be me. With my mom and dad and their training, I usually did very well in school. And, I'm the son of a professor. I just thought, well, gosh, if anyone is going to college, it should be me. But one big problem, how would I pay for it? So I remember at the end of ninth grade, still, as a middle schooler on the verge of high school, I was kind of slacking off. And I was sure I was not going to get an A in the English class. The teacher kind of poked fun at me a little bit, good-natured humor. And lo and behold, miraculously, I got an A minus. And I ended with a 4.0 my freshman year. And with this thinking of the best possible outcome, I thought, hey, wait a minute. I could, again, is it improbable? Is it likely? I could finish with a 4.0. I could graduate with a 4.0. And so it began. Game on. I went into 10th grade, did well. It wasn't too difficult. It was some work. You got to get the work done. And I got another 4.0. But then 11th grade, everyone knew about Mrs. Rucker. She was tough. And few people could ever get an A in her class, but I was determined. So I'm building this habit of believing in the best possible outcome. And so that's the second thing to keep in mind. You can do it once or twice, but to make it a habit that whenever you come against some huge giant obstacle in 11th grade, that was Mrs. Rucker's English writing literature class. I persevered. I stayed upstairs when all of the commotion and fun noises were happening downstairs. I studied hard. I got that A, and I graduated with the 4.0. Now, this was so exciting as I was applying to all those colleges and hoping for some kind of a scholarship that could really pay the way. I was a little disappointed, a little bit discouraged that some of my offers, I applied to 7 schools, and I wasn't getting a lot of really good scholarship offers. But my favorite school that I visited, Ohio Wesleyan University, beautiful campus, and also the most expensive small college that I had applied to. I just was hoping that something could work out. And sure enough, I get the letter in the mail. I'm reading that letter. Congratulations. You have been awarded a presidential full tuition scholarship. Yes. What a thrill. These experiences, even in the midst of all that, I had many difficult times, but I focused on the best possible outcome. Now, making a habit of this can go on and continue even through as we get older. So I finished my statistics degree at Ohio State. I moved to Chicago and worked for Nielsen TV Ratings, which was a great place to be. And then I made a decision, partly emboldened by this thinking about the best possible outcome. I had joined this really cool rock band, and I decided I'm going to move to LA. I'm going to be a rock star. Literally, I'm one of those guys. I did it though, and it was very exciting. Of course, there were major setbacks along the way, and the biggest setback was about 2 years after I was there, unexpectedly, my father passed away. That was my first true experience with grief. And grief is not like just a disappointment. Grief is very heavy. It's very difficult. And I had a very difficult time. I finished my time in Los Angeles. I made a few milestones in my music career, but I was very fortunate to get back to kind of normalcy in Dallas, Texas, where I resurrected my statistics career after my musical foray. Now, in Dallas, I had discovered my faith by going to this small church, especially after the challenge of the grief of my father passing. And there were some dark times for me. So this became a pivotal time for me where I discovered God in a bigger sense. I had always believed in God in a peripheral way, but I began to trust God. I began to pray for things that were important and meaningful. And when I made missteps, I made a big effort to seek the right path for my life. And sure enough, again, in a big way, I started discovering the miracles of what God can do through me when I'm leaning on the scripture, his word, and insights that you can really only get from God. I had a really difficult time for about 5 years after my dad passed of trying to get advice from everyone. I mean, anyone that I could, that I trusted. And no person could really give me clarity or the advice that I really needed. I had to develop that relationship through prayer, that God is very real and he will guide me. He will guide all of us. So I discovered that he had a very big purpose for my life. And in fact, I discovered that it was through adversity, a kind of adversity that I had never even thought possible. Let me share a story with you. I had just opened a daycare for the church. The church was running out of funds. I was the treasurer. I made bold, miraculous, believing decisions, and we opened the daycare. The church was set with the funds. I bought my first home, and through prayer, I met my future wife. Now, when we met, it was a very quick courtship, and she told me that she had some childhood trauma in her past. That was something important she had to share with me. I felt honored that God would give me someone to love that I could help nurture and maybe help her heal. I loved my wife. It was pure bliss when we first got married, but it began to change pretty quickly. Now, imagine in February of 2020, this is right before COVID, I found myself in a different kind of lockdown. About 2 years prior, a year and a half prior, I had my first experience of being arrested for a misdemeanor domestic violence, which I had no idea how it got to something like that when I was trying to manage the household. It was the first false accusation. But now 2 years later, it was a felony domestic violence accusation, a false accusation by my own wife. I was devastated. It's the person that I love the most in my whole life. How could she possibly think those things? So that was my first experience, truly, truly, with the greatest adversity of my life. There I was in the Dallas County Jail for over 3 weeks with murderers, bank robbers, drug dealers, killers, just some very hard people. And it was scary. I was praying. There was one guy in particular didn't like me praying. And I thank God that what he showed me in the most unlikely of places, right there in the jail, God began to give me visions of what he intended out of this adversity. Now, that's hard to believe. That can be very hard to believe. But when the worst adversity hits you, this is the third thing to keep in mind. You tackle it just like you did all those other wonderful, amazing visions and, the things that you dared to believe in that same worst case scenario. You tackle it with the same enthusiasm, the same belief that there's the best possible outcome out of this. When I prayed, God had me memorize all of Psalm 27. It's a powerful psalm against false witnesses and being victorious. He gave me an insight and a vision from Isaiah 22:22, the key of David that can open doors that no man can shut, close doors that no man can open, that he would open a permanent door of love between me and my wife. Now, even in the most difficult circumstances, that is inspiring. And what I learned is to trust God. That in trusting God, he would show me what I would need to know. He would show me the paths I would need to take. He would give me favor. He would bring the right people into my life to bring the right outcomes and the right circumstances. And one by one, step by step, the scariest thing that I ever had to go through. I got out of that jail with a leg monitor on. I was grieving. I would spend hours of grieving and crying. It's very difficult. But then the leg monitor came off. One of my church Bible study mentors invited me to the Rocky Mountains to clear my head. Wow. What a blessing. What a blessing that was. Another chance where God gave me another vision of how to proceed. Now, adversity is something that we all go through. What I began to learn more and more was that God was not going to give me more than what I could handle. And in fact, he was preparing me. I remember praying and asking him, God, did this have to happen like this? Did I have to get arrested? And could I have done something different? I remember one time he said, I was taking my son for a walk, that first misdemeanor, and I felt the Holy Spirit kind of directed me, just go down this way. And I didn't. And that was the beginning of that first arrest. And so, you wrestle with what I should have done, what I could have done. But as the years progressed, God was faithful to bring the right people into my life. An amazing lawyer, reestablishing a relationship with my stepdaughter, victorious outcomes in the custody case, even long periods of time for me and my wife to, even in the middle of a very difficult custody case, to connect in ways and see that possibly there may be a best possible outcome still in the cards. Now, I want to encourage all of you that if you are going through any adversity, just like back when I was a kid, I saw both my mom and dad go through incredible hardships. The first son died of leukemia when he was 4, right before I was born. My younger brother lost his hearing, and we had some real difficult times in the family. But I saw them choose to focus on the good things, on the blessings. And by focusing on the blessings and believing that there is a victorious outcome and there's a reason to persevere, that truly the biggest blessings begin to pour in. And what an amazing thing that is. So I encourage all of you, with any kind of adversity, you can stay inspired by believing in the best possible outcome, making a habit of believing in the best possible outcome. When adversity hits, tackle it the same way, with the same kind of enthusiasm, and believing, again, in the best possible outcome. And above all things, trust God. Trust God in the process, that he is putting you through a journey to build you up, to make you grow and learn and become stronger for new things that he has in store for you. Great blessings and wonderful experiences. That is how you stay inspired through adversity.
Thank you for participating in today's enlightening session. As we transition to our next expert, remember that each strategy and insight is a step toward becoming a transformative leader in your field. Visit connectedleadersacademy.com to stay engaged and informed. The journey of change is ongoing. Let's move forward together.